The Galactic Council had watched the edge of known space for 10,000 cycles, and nothing new ever came from there. That region was dead. No stars were born there. No empires expanded there. No signals survived the long dark. So when a weak pulse appeared on the outer scanners, the operators laughed. It was slow, uneven, and badly compressed, like something built by a species that did not understand modern space travel. The junior analyst almost deleted it, thinking it was noise from a dying star. But the signal repeated. Again. And again. Each time it grew slightly stronger, like a heartbeat learning how to beat. The council chamber was still calm. The elders leaned back in their floating seats, bored. Old civilizations always made these mistakes. Some forgotten probe, some lost relic, drifting in circles. Nothing to fear. Then the signal changed. The frequency widened. The power spiked. The tone sharpened. And for the first time in centuries, the warning lights activated. The laughter died instantly. The edge of space went dark as 3 distant stars vanished at once. Not exploded. Not consumed. Blocked. Something vast moved between them and the galaxy. The main display struggled to adjust. The image blurred, glitched, froze. The scanners screamed overload. Data collapsed into static. The chamber filled with silence, thick and heavy. The elders leaned forward now. This was not a fleet. Fleets had formation, heat trails, warp echoes. This had none. It was one shape, one mass, one shadow, bigger than a moon, bigger than some planets. It drifted forward without engines, without light, without sound. Space bent around it like water around a falling stone. The oldest elder whispered the words no one had spoken in an age. First contact. Fear spread faster than any signal ever could. Across thousands of worlds, sensors failed. Civilian traffic halted. Defense grids powered up. Priests prayed. Soldiers waited. The galaxy had finally met humanity, and it already felt like a mistake. The object continued to move, slow and steady, ignoring all borders, all warnings, all patrol lines. It did not accelerate. It did not slow. It simply came closer, like it had all the time in existence. When it crossed into council-controlled space, the military demanded permission to fire. The elders refused. They needed to see it. They needed to understand what kind of species built something so large and yet so silent. The first clear image finally formed, and even the strongest minds struggled to accept it. The surface was not smooth metal. It was layered, scarred, cracked and welded again. Entire sections were different colors, different ages, different materials. Some plates were ancient, dull and dark, eaten by time. Others were new, bright, fresh, like open wounds that had just been sealed. The ship looked alive, not because it moved, but because it carried history on its skin. Every mark was damage. Every repair was survival. This was not a ship made for beauty or speed. It was made to endure. The Council's historians felt cold. This thing had been traveling for a very long time. Maybe longer than some civilizations had existed. The object finally stopped, exactly 1 light minute from the capital system. Still no weapons. Still no message. Just waiting. The Council argued. Some demanded an immediate attack. Others begged for peace. But fear was louder than reason. They needed a name for it, something to contain the terror in a word. And so the Council declared it officially, the Floating Terror. The name spread like fire. News channels repeated it. Civilians whispered it. Children cried because of it. The galaxy now had a monster, and monsters were meant to be destroyed. But inside the ship, far beyond the reach of Council fear, humans called it something else. They called it home. Inside the massive hull, light was warm and soft, not cold like military ships. Long corridors curved gently, designed for people who walked, not floated. Old banners hung from the ceiling, faded but carefully preserved. Children ran through the halls, laughing, chasing each other, unaware that entire star empires were pointing weapons at their walls. Elders sat near wide windows, watching stars drift past, remembering a planet they would never see again. Gardens grew in massive chambers, trees bending toward artificial suns, roots spread through soil carried across the galaxy. The ship breathed slowly, recycling air, water, and hope. This was not a war machine. It was a moving world. A last piece of a lost civilization. At the center of it all, the human captain stood alone, looking at the galaxy map. His face was calm, but his eyes were tired. Humanity had not come to conquer. They had come to test. To see if the galaxy was safe. To see if it was kind. And already, the answer did not look good. Back in the council chamber, the silence broke when one elder finally spoke. If this is one ship, where are the rest? The question hung in the air like poison. No one answered, because no one knew. And that uncertainty was worse than any weapon. The galaxy had built its empires on control, on strength, on numbers. But this thing did not care about any of that. It did not demand. It did not threaten. It simply existed. And existence, in this case, was terrifying. Sensors showed something even worse now. The ship was powering internal systems, slowly, carefully, like a giant waking from deep sleep. Energy signatures rolled across its surface, ancient and complex. Not weapons. Not shields. Something else. Something the scanners could not translate. The fear deepened. The elders felt it in their bones. They had judged too quickly. Whatever humanity was, it was not weak. It was not primitive. It was patient. And patience, the galaxy would soon learn, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The monster ship hung in space like a silent god, and the galaxy could not look away. Every camera, every sensor, every eye was locked on it, waiting for it to move, to attack, to speak, to do anything that would make sense. But it did nothing. It simply existed, and that was worse. Slowly, the Council's long-range scanners began to recover from the shock, pulling in details piece by piece, like blind hands touching something too big to understand. The ship had no engines. At least, none that the galaxy recognized. There were no exhaust trails, no warp scars, no gravity ripples. Space itself did not seem to notice its movement. It was as if the ship had decided where it wanted to be, and reality obeyed. That realization sent a cold wave through the council chamber. No empire had ever built something like this. Not even the ancients. As the image sharpened, the truth became heavier. The surface was not one design. It was many. Entire civilizations could be seen in its skin, layered over each other like memories that refused to die. Old alloy plates sat next to newer composite armor. Some parts were smooth and clean, others were jagged and scarred, burned by weapons long forgotten. Deep cracks ran across the hull, but every crack had been sealed, reinforced, healed. This ship had been broken more times than anyone could count, and yet it still flew. The historians felt something twist inside them. This was not engineering. This was stubbornness made into metal. This was survival given form. The council named it again, louder this time, like the word itself might protect them. The floating terror. The name spread across the stars, but it changed nothing. Fear does not shrink when you name it. It grows. Civilian ships turned back. Trade routes closed. Military fleets formed lines that looked small and fragile next to the massive shadow. The galaxy had never faced something that did not follow its rules. Everything had engines. Everything had limits. Everything could be measured. This could not. And that made it a nightmare. Inside the monster ship, the mood was different. There was no panic, no rushing, no screaming alarms. People moved slowly, calmly, as they always had. A woman walked through a corridor carrying fresh water to the gardens, her steps steady. Two old men sat on a bench, arguing softly about a song they remembered from Earth. A group of children pressed their hands to a viewing window, watching alien stars slide past, their eyes full of wonder, not fear. They had grown up inside this ship. They did not know what planets felt like under their feet. This steel world was all they had ever known. To them, the galaxy was the strange thing, not the ship. The captain stood at the main observation deck, hands behind his back, staring at the council space. He had seen fear before. He had seen it in the eyes of his people when Earth burned, when the sky turned red, when the last evacuation ships failed to lift. He remembered the screams, the silence, the empty space where a world used to be. This ship was built from that loss. Every plate came from wreckage. Every system was repaired with parts taken from dead fleets and broken stations. Humanity had not built the floating terror in peace. They built it while running, while dying, while refusing to disappear. That was why it looked the way it did. It was not meant to be beautiful. It was meant to last. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. The ship's core had fully awakened. Power flowed through ancient circuits, through patched cables, through systems older than some stars. The ship responded like an old animal stretching its limbs after a long sleep. The captain closed his eyes for a moment. This was the moment of truth. They had reached the galaxy at last. The place that had watched them suffer and did nothing. The place that might now decide their fate. He opened his eyes and whispered a single order. Hold position. The words echoed through the massive hull, calm and firm. Humanity would not fire first. They never did. They would wait. They would watch. They would judge. Back in the council chamber, the silence broke with shaking voices. Some elders begged for an attack. Others begged for mercy. None of them noticed the most important detail on the screen. The monster ship had opened its outer layers, not weapons, not shields, but windows. Thousands of them. And behind them were lights. Warm lights. Living lights. The council finally understood. This was not a warship. It was a city. A grave. A home. And the terror they felt now was not of being destroyed, but of what they had almost destroyed themselves. The galaxy waited, and waiting began to hurt. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like cycles. The monster ship did not move. It did not attack. It did not speak. It only watched, silent and heavy, like a thought no one could escape. Across council space, weapons stayed locked, fingers hovered over triggers, commanders swallowed fear and sweat, but still nothing happened. This silence was not empty. It was loud. It pressed against minds, against nerves, against hearts. Civilizations were used to noise, to messages, to threats, to demands. They knew how to answer those. But this was different. This was being observed. And no one knew why. Inside the floating terror, the silence was also thick, but it carried a different weight. The human crew moved slowly, carefully, as if any sudden sound might break something fragile. The children were kept away from the windows now, gently guided back to the inner halls, where old stories were told and soft lights glowed. The elders gathered in small circles, hands trembling slightly as they remembered other silences, silences that came before disaster. The ship's hum was steady, deep, comforting, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. This ship had saved them before. It would save them again. They believed that with all they had left. The captain stood at the center of the bridge, watching the galaxy watch him. He could feel their fear even across the void. He understood it. Long ago, humanity had feared the unknown too. They had feared the dark between stars. They had feared silence. And because of that fear, they had built weapons instead of bridges. They had learned the hard way what fear could do. He would not repeat that mistake. His hands rested on the rail, steady, but his chest ached. He thought of Earth again, as he always did in moments like this. The blue sky, the rain, the smell of soil, all gone, replaced by metal and memory. This ship was their last promise, to survive long enough to find someone who would not shoot first. Back in the council chamber, panic began to leak through the cracks of authority. Reports flooded in from the outer systems. Trade had stopped. Pilgrims had turned back. Even pirates were hiding. The galaxy had never been this quiet. The elders argued in whispers now, afraid the ship might hear them. One demanded a warning shot. Another demanded surrender. Another demanded prayer. None of it mattered. The monster ship did not respond to fear. It did not respond to power. It responded to time. And time was something the council could not control. Then something changed. A pulse rolled across the surface of the ship, slow and soft, like light moving through water. It was not a weapon. It was not a shield. It was a signal, but not one meant for machines. It was meant for minds. Across the bridge, human crew members froze, eyes wide, as memories washed over them. Voices. Faces. Lost names. The ship was speaking to them, reminding them who they were and why they had come. The captain closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every life carried inside these walls. This was not just a test of the galaxy. It was a test of humanity itself. Could they still be kind, after everything they had lost? The pulse reached the council scanners seconds later. Their systems could not read it, could not translate it, but every elder felt it. A deep sadness filled the chamber, heavy and slow, like mourning for a world none of them had ever seen. Some of them gasped. One of them cried out and collapsed. The youngest elder whispered, shaking, "They are not threatening us, they are grieving." The realization struck like a blade. This silence was not waiting for permission to kill. It was waiting for permission to trust. The monster ship remained still, but the galaxy had changed. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something new and dangerous, guilt. And guilt, the council knew, could push them into actions far worse than war. The silence finally broke, not with fire, not with movement, but with a voice that sounded tired of surviving. It came through every channel at once, slipping past firewalls, codes, and defenses like they were not even there. The translators struggled, then steadied, then went quiet as the meaning became clear. The message was simple. No threats. No demands. No pride. Only truth. The voice was human, rough and calm, carrying the weight of too many losses. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to beg. We are here to see who you are. The words echoed through the council chamber, and for the first time since the monster ship arrived, no one spoke. The elders stared at the air, as if the voice had left a mark. This was not how first contact was supposed to sound. There was no greeting, no promise of trade, no request for alliance. It was a question, and it cut deeper than any weapon. Inside the floating terror, the bridge lights dimmed as the transmission ended. The captain lowered his hand slowly. Around him, the crew stood in silence, some holding their breath, some holding back tears. That message had taken more courage than firing 1,000 guns. They had exposed themselves. They had shown weakness. And in a galaxy that respected only strength, that was dangerous. The captain looked at the image of the council space again, his eyes filled with something between hope and fear. Humanity had sent their truth into the dark. Now they would see what came back. Across the galaxy, the message spread faster than panic ever had. On distant worlds, people stopped and listened. Soldiers removed helmets. Merchants closed shops. Priests forgot their prayers. The words were too honest to ignore. They were not the words of monsters. They were the words of the broken. Of survivors. And that frightened the galaxy even more. Because broken things could still be dangerous. And survivors had nothing left to lose. The council chamber erupted moments later, not with unity, but with chaos. Some elders shouted that this was a trick, a lie meant to soften them before an attack. Others argued that no species capable of such a ship would need lies. Fear twisted every thought. Pride poisoned every decision. The oldest elder rose slowly, his voice shaking with anger. They dare judge us. They arrive uninvited, block our stars, frighten our people, and then ask who we are. His words filled the chamber like fire. One by one, the elders nodded. The question felt like an insult now. The message, a challenge. The monster ship had not bowed. It had not feared them. And the council could not accept that. The vote was fast. Too fast. There was no time for reflection, no time for understanding, no time for mercy. Fear demanded action, and action demanded force. The order went out in cold, official words: prepare the fleets. Charge the weapons. Show them the cost of judgment. Across council space, thousands of warships powered up. Engines burned bright. Shields flared to life. The stars themselves seemed to tense, waiting for what would come next. Inside the floating terror, the alarms finally sounded. Not loud, not sharp, but low and deep, like a warning whispered through metal bones. The captain felt it before he heard it. The galaxy had answered. Not with words, but with fear made into weapons. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were heavy with sorrow, not anger. They chose, he said quietly. The crew did not cheer. They did not rush. They simply took their places, faces calm, hands steady, hearts breaking just a little more. Humanity had hoped for a different answer. But hope, they had learned, was fragile. As the fleets moved into position, the monster ship remained still. It did not raise shields. It did not aim weapons. It waited. Because this was always the final test. Not of power. Not of technology. But of character. And the galaxy was about to reveal who it truly was. The first shot was not loud. It was clean, precise, and official. A thin line of light crossed the darkness between the fleets and the monster ship, moving faster than thought, faster than fear. For a single heartbeat, the galaxy believed it had done the right thing. The beam struck the hull of the floating terror and vanished, swallowed like a drop of rain hitting an ocean. No explosion came. No fire. No damage. The silence returned, heavier than before. Then the second shot came. And the third. And the 1000th. Space filled with color and fury as entire fleets opened fire together. Lasers burned. Plasma roared. Missiles screamed. The galaxy unleashed everything it had, pouring centuries of fear and pride into a storm of destruction. Inside the council chamber, the elders watched with clenched hands and wide eyes. This was supposed to be enough. It had to be. Nothing could survive this. Entire civilizations had fallen to less. The screens filled with blinding light as weapons struck again and again, washing over the massive hull like waves crashing against a mountain. For a moment, hope returned. Some elders even smiled. Then the light faded. And the ship was still there. The floating terror did not move. It did not burn. It did not break. The weapons slid across its surface, bending, fading, dissolving into nothing. Old scars glowed faintly, then dimmed, as if the ship itself remembered worse pain and found this attack meaningless. The galaxy's strongest firepower had become a whisper. Fear spread like poison. Commanders shouted new orders. More weapons fired. Stronger beams. Bigger missiles. Nothing changed. The monster ship remained calm, silent, unmoved. Inside the ship, the children felt the vibrations first. The walls trembled, not violently, but enough to be noticed. Some of them stopped playing. Some looked up, confused. Mothers pulled them close, whispering old songs, the kind that had been sung on Earth when storms shook the windows. The elders closed their eyes, feeling history repeat itself. They had felt this before. They had lost a world to fear once. They would not lose their people again. The captain stood on the bridge, unmoving, watching the attack with eyes that reflected pain more than anger. He had hoped the galaxy would listen. He had hoped the message had reached them. It had not. And now, humanity was being judged again, without a trial, without a voice, without mercy. The final order came from the council fleet, sharp and desperate. All weapons. Maximum output. The stars themselves seemed to scream as space bent under the force of the attack. The floating terror finally responded. Not with rage. Not with speed. But with patience. A single panel on its surface opened, slow and smooth, like a door opening after a long wait. No alarms blared. No warning sounded. A small, quiet device drifted out into space, glowing softly, almost gently. The council's scanners ignored it at first. It was too small. Too weak. Then it activated. The light vanished. Sound vanished. Even thought seemed to pause. And in that silence, entire fleets disappeared. Not exploded. Not torn apart. Erased. Ships that had ruled the stars for centuries were simply gone, leaving behind empty space where they had once existed. The attack had lasted seconds. The message it sent would last forever. The galaxy froze. Weapons powered down. Voices died in throats. No one dared to breathe. The monster ship closed the panel and returned to stillness, like nothing had happened. Inside the floating terror, the captain lowered his head. The crew stood in silence, some shaking, some crying quietly, all of them carrying the same heavy truth. Humanity had not struck in anger. They had struck in warning. This was the price of fear. This was the cost of choosing violence over understanding. Outside, the galaxy stared into the empty space where its fleets had been, and for the first time in its long history, it understood something it had forgotten how to feel. The galaxy did not speak after that. It could not. Where fleets had once burned bright, there was only empty space, cold and silent, like a grave no one dared to visit. The council chamber felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Elders sat frozen, their authority shattered, their certainty turned to ash. They had wanted to show power. Instead, they had shown weakness. And the monster ship still waited, unmoving, unchanged, like a judge that did not need to speak again. The scanners slowly came back online, trembling as they reached out to the massive hull once more. This time, the data did not bring fear. It brought confusion. There were no weapons charging. No shields rising. No fleets forming inside the ship. Instead, the readings showed life. Thousands of signatures. No, millions. Families. Children. Elders. Gardens. Water systems. Schools. Living spaces. The council scientists stared in disbelief as the truth unfolded layer by layer. This was not a warship. It never had been. It was a city. A moving world. A sanctuary built from desperation. The name Floating Terror now sounded like a cruel joke. Inside the ship, the captain finally allowed himself to sit. His hands shook as the adrenaline faded, and the weight of what had happened settled on his chest. He had erased fleets. He had ended lives. Even in defense, even as a warning, it hurt. Humanity did not forget the cost of survival. They carried it with them like a shadow. Around him, the crew moved quietly, eyes red, voices soft. No one celebrated. No one smiled. Victory had no place here. This was only another scar added to a ship already full of them. Deep inside the hull, an old hall opened, its walls covered with names. Billions of names, carved, etched, painted, projected. Names of worlds. Names of people. Names of children who never grew old. This was the memory core. The heart of the ship. The place where humanity stored its grief so it would not poison the living. The elders gathered there now, hands pressed to the walls, whispering to ghosts. They felt the galaxy's fear through the metal, and it reminded them of Earth's last day, when the sky fell and no one came to help. The truth was simple, and it was cruel. Humanity had not built the Floating Terror to fight. They had built it to escape. To carry what little remained of their species into the dark. Every system was designed to protect life, not to take it. The weapon that erased fleets was not meant for war. It was meant to clear debris, to open paths through collapsing stars, to survive the end of systems. The galaxy had forced them to use it. That knowledge burned more than the act itself. The captain rose slowly and walked to the main window. The stars beyond looked small now, fragile, untrustworthy. He spoke, not to the galaxy, but to the people behind him. We showed them who we are, he said quietly. Now we will see who they choose to be. His voice was steady, but inside him, something ached. Humanity had wanted a home, a place to rest, a place to belong again. Instead, they had found fear wearing the face of power. Back in the council chamber, one elder finally broke. His voice cracked as he whispered, "We attacked refugees." The words spread like poison. Refugees. Survivors. The realization crushed them. They had aimed their greatest weapons at a people who were running, not invading. The shame was worse than fear now. It burned. It ate at their pride. And in that moment, the council understood that they had already lost something they could never get back. Trust. The silence that followed was different. It was not fear anymore. It was shame. It spread through the galaxy slowly, like a cold that reached into bones and stayed there. Worlds that had cheered the council's decision now turned away from their screens. Soldiers lowered their heads. Commanders avoided their own reflections. The Floating Terror still waited, still watched, but now the galaxy understood that it was not being threatened. It was being judged. And that judgment was quiet, heavy, and impossible to escape. Inside the monster ship, the human children were finally allowed back to the windows. They pressed their hands against the glass, eyes wide, watching alien stars drift by. They did not understand politics. They did not understand fleets or councils or war. They only felt that something sad had happened. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked, "Why are they afraid of us?" The mother did not know how to answer. She knelt, held her child close, and whispered the only truth she had. "Because they don't know us yet." Her voice shook, and the child nodded, accepting it like all children accept things they should never have to accept. The elders of humanity gathered in the memory hall again, standing before the endless wall of names. They added new ones. Quietly, carefully. The names of those lost in the erased fleets. Humanity did not celebrate their destruction. They mourned them. Every life mattered. Even the ones that tried to kill them. This was the difference the galaxy could not yet understand. Strength without mercy was easy. Mercy after pain was not. And still, humanity chose it. The captain stood alone on the bridge, staring at the council space. His hands were clenched now, not in anger, but in restraint. He could end this. One order, one motion, one release of power, and the galaxy would kneel forever. The floating terror could rule the stars. Humanity could become the monsters everyone feared. The thought made his chest tighten. He had seen what monsters did to worlds. He would not let humanity become one, even if it meant walking away from safety again. A soft signal pulsed from the ship, not to the galaxy, but inward, reaching every human inside the hull. It carried no words, only feeling. Loss. Tiredness. Hope. The shared pain of a species that had lost everything and still refused to lose itself. People stopped where they stood. Some cried. Some smiled through tears. Some simply closed their eyes and breathed. They remembered who they were. They remembered why they had survived. Not to conquer. Not to punish. But to live. In the council chamber, the youngest elder fell to his knees. He could not carry the shame anymore. His voice broke as he spoke. "We are not worthy of their fear," he whispered. "We are not worthy of their restraint." The chamber did not answer him, because everyone knew he was right. The galaxy had failed its first test. It had chosen violence. And now, it had to live with that truth. The monster ship began to turn. Slowly. Gently. Not as a threat. Not as a retreat. But as a goodbye. Its massive form shifted, blocking new stars, casting long shadows across systems that would remember this moment forever. The floating terror was leaving. And the pain of that realization hit harder than any weapon. The galaxy had been given one chance to show kindness. It had used it to fire guns. Inside the ship, the children waved at the stars, not knowing they were waving goodbye to a home they would never have. The elders bowed their heads. The captain closed his eyes for a long moment, feeling the weight of a decision that would echo through history. Humanity would go on alone again. But they would go on clean. And that mattered more than victory. As the floating terror drifted away, the galaxy felt something tear inside it, like losing a future it had not yet earned. The massive ship moved slowly, its shadow sliding across star systems like a final breath. No weapons followed it. No fleets chased it. The council could not even pretend to command anymore. Their voices were gone, buried under regret. The stars themselves seemed quieter now, as if they too were ashamed of what had been done. Inside the ship, the corridors filled with a soft, aching silence. People moved like ghosts, careful not to disturb the fragile peace holding them together. The children stopped laughing. The elders stopped speaking. Everyone felt it. The moment when hope slipped through their fingers and disappeared into the dark. The ship was alive, but its heart was heavy. The captain walked through the long halls, passing faces that looked to him for answers he did not have. He had promised them a future once. Now all he could give them was survival again. Then the message arrived. It did not come through the council channels. It came from everywhere. From every world. From every voice. It was not one signal, but millions, stitched together in a wave of desperation. The galaxy was begging. Not for mercy. Not for protection. But for a second chance. Worlds opened their systems. Borders fell. Ancient enemies stood together, sending the same message in 1,000 languages. Please, do not leave. The sound of it hit the ship like a storm. Humans froze in their steps. Some collapsed to their knees. Some covered their faces. They had not expected this. They had expected silence. They had expected relief. But this was something else. The captain stopped at the observation deck, staring at the flood of signals. His hands trembled for the first time since the journey began. He could feel the weight of his people behind him. Every life, every loss, every dream. The galaxy had failed them once. But now it was trying to stand again, broken and honest. That mattered. He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of his crew. "This is the hardest part," he said softly. "Trusting again." No one answered, but no one looked away. In the memory hall, the elders stood before the wall of names, and something changed. A new light appeared between the old ones. A space, empty and waiting. Not a name of the dead, but a promise for the living. Humanity had been running for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to stop. To choose. To hope. The galaxy was offering them pain again, risk again, loss again. And also something they had not felt in a very long time. Belonging. The ship slowed. Just a little. Enough for the galaxy to feel it. Enough for hearts to race. The captain closed his eyes and thought of Earth one last time, not the burning world, but the green one. The one worth saving. Then he gave the order, his voice quiet but steady. "Open the gates." The words echoed through the hull, and the floating terror answered, turning its massive body back toward the waiting stars. Across the galaxy, worlds cried out in relief. Fleets powered down. Weapons fell silent. For the first time since first contact, no one was afraid. Humanity had not forgiven yet. But they had not abandoned the galaxy either. And that was more than anyone had hoped for. The floating terror moved forward again, not as a monster, not as a judge, but as a bridge. And the galaxy held its breath, praying it would not fail this time. The galaxy leaned forward as one, holding its breath while the floating terror turned back. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The massive ship glided through space with slow, careful grace, like a wounded giant choosing to trust again. Every system that had once aimed weapons now powered them down, not by command, but by instinct. Fear was still there, but it was different now. It was mixed with hope, and that made it fragile. Inside the ship, the air changed. It was subtle, almost invisible, but everyone felt it. The halls seemed warmer. The lights softer. People looked at each other with eyes that carried questions instead of despair. Children ran again, slower this time, quieter, as if they were afraid to scare hope away. The elders sat together, speaking in whispers, remembering how it felt to believe in tomorrow. Humanity had been alone for so long that even the idea of connection felt dangerous. But they were tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of being ghosts in the dark. The captain stood at the center of the bridge, watching the galaxy open itself like a wound that wanted to heal. Systems unlocked. Borders vanished. Ancient defense grids shut down. The galaxy was not just asking for forgiveness. It was offering vulnerability. That mattered more than words. His chest tightened as he realized what this moment meant. If humanity accepted, there would be no turning back. Pain would return. Loss would return. But so would life. A small ship detached from the council space, slow and unarmed, moving toward the floating terror. No shields. No escort. Just a single vessel carrying a single truth. Inside it sat the youngest elder, his hands shaking, his eyes tired and honest. He carried no weapons, no symbols of power, no pride. Only a message he had written himself. When the ship reached communication range, he spoke, his voice breaking. "We were wrong. We were afraid. And we let that fear make us cruel. If you leave, the galaxy will stay what it is. Broken. If you stay, we might become better." The words echoed through the floating terror, touching every human heart. Some turned away, unable to listen. Some cried openly. Some clenched their fists, remembering the fleets that had vanished, the lives lost, the scars still burning. Forgiveness was not easy. It never was. The captain closed his eyes, feeling the weight of history press down on him. Humanity had been destroyed once by a galaxy that looked away. Now that same galaxy was kneeling. Not in weakness, but in honesty. The memory hall glowed softly as new names appeared, not of the dead, but of worlds. Worlds offering shelter. Worlds offering friendship. worlds offering a place to rest. The elders touched the glowing light, and for the first time in generations, they smiled. Not wide, not strong, but real. The captain took a breath and answered, his voice steady, carrying across the void. We will not forget what happened, he said. But we will not let it end us either. The galaxy heard those words and understood them as both warning and gift. Humanity was staying. Not as rulers. Not as saviors. But as equals. The floating terror moved closer, and the distance between humanity and the galaxy finally began to close, not with weapons, not with fear, but with the hardest thing any civilization could offer. The galaxy held its breath. Every system, every fleet, every living being that had once trembled before the floating terror now waited, unsure if the humans would stay or leave, unsure if mercy was stronger than wrath. The captain stood on the bridge, hands resting lightly on the railing, eyes tracing the endless stars that had once meant nothing but death. He could feel the weight of every life inside this ship, of every child who had never seen Earth, of every elder who remembered a home that no longer existed. They had survived so much. And now, after everything, they had a choice. A single decision that could define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The Council's representatives approached in trembling vessels, weapons lowered, communications open but silent. They had seen fleets erased, they had felt fear, and now they were offering something even harder, trust. The words were simple, almost fragile. Will you stay? They asked. The ships trembled as if echoing the question. Humanity had been betrayed too many times to answer without care, too many times to respond without thought. Yet inside the floating terror, hearts beat steadily. They had carried hope across the stars, and now hope waited to see if it could live. The captain turned to his crew, his voice soft but carrying through the hollow halls like a promise. We could strike now. We could erase everything that threatened us. We could claim the galaxy and make it ours. But we are not monsters. We are survivors. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The crew nodded silently. They understood. They had learned the price of power, the cost of vengeance. They had seen death come too close, too many times. They would not add to it now. Not when survival had already demanded so much. The gates of the floating terror began to open. Slowly, carefully, like a giant exhaling after centuries of running. Massive doors revealed glowing corridors, spaces filled with life, with warmth, with history. Streams of humans moved outward, not as soldiers, not as conquerors, but as emissaries of a species that had refused to die, that had carried its grief and memory across the void and preserved it, refined it into something stronger than fear. They extended hands, offered words, offered presence. Every gesture carried weight. Every step was a statement. Humanity was here. And they had chosen restraint. Across the galaxy, worlds trembled. Systems opened ports, sent ships, transmitted greetings. Even enemies hesitated to threaten. The sheer courage of not striking back, of offering peace instead of retaliation, shook the foundations of centuries of war. Fleets lowered weapons. Diplomats wiped sweat from their brows. Historians whispered that this would be remembered for millennia. The galaxy was witnessing something unprecedented, a species that had lost everything yet carried the strength to forgive, to offer mercy, to demand nothing in return. It was frightening. It was beautiful. It was human. Inside the ship, the captain walked slowly among his people. He saw tears on the faces of children who had never seen a planet's soil. He saw relief on the faces of elders who had carried memory like a burden. He saw courage reflected in every human eye, the courage of a species that could endure loss without giving in to hatred. He raised his hand, not to command, but to signal. We are here, he said simply. We are listening. We are waiting. We are staying. The galaxy did not move. It waited, too, because it understood now that humanity's choice was more than strategy, more than survival. It was a test, a lesson in restraint, in honor, in the power of mercy. Every species, every empire, every mind felt the weight of that decision, and in that moment, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer to watch. And for the first time, humanity was not running. It was not hiding. It was standing tall, offering what it had learned the hardest way, that strength was not only measured in power, but in the courage to spare, to forgive, to choose life over destruction. And slowly, The galaxy began to step forward, hesitantly, unsure, but willing. Fleets approached carefully. Envoys spoke softly. Borders became bridges. A universe that had once feared humanity now held its breath for something entirely different: hope. The floating terror moved among them, no longer a monster, no longer a terror. It was a symbol, a moving testament to a species that had endured everything and returned, not with rage, but with a heart strong enough to change the course of the stars. The galaxy was quiet, but it was no longer afraid. The emptiness left by destroyed fleets and shattered pride had turned into a fragile, trembling calm. Every world, every fleet, every being that had once trembled at the sight of the floating terror now looked upon it with something that resembled awe. It was not fear anymore. It was understanding. It was reflection. It was the weight of realizing that humanity had carried more than anyone could imagine and had still chosen restraint, had still chosen life. Inside the massive hull, the captain walked slowly down the corridors, past windows that revealed stars, civilizations, and now, tentative faces of hope. The children ran past him, laughing softly, chasing shadows of themselves in the artificial sunlight. Elders followed, hands resting on walls, absorbing the life that flowed through the ship, carrying grief and history together, heavy but alive. The memory hall glowed softly, every name shining, not as a reminder of what was lost, but as a promise for what could still exist. Humanity had survived. Not because they had power, not because they had weapons, but because they had endured, because they had learned, because they had chosen mercy over vengeance, life over death. The captain stopped at the main observation deck, staring out into the galaxy that had once tried to destroy them. He remembered every planet burned, every friend lost, every star that had gone dark before they could even touch it. And yet, here they were. The galaxy had sent fleets, weapons, and threats, but humanity had not returned hatred with hatred. They had returned survival with patience, courage, and a heart that refused to harden completely. For the first time in centuries, the stars were not just lights. They were witnesses. They watched as the floating terror extended its massive presence like an open hand, a gesture of what humanity had become, a species scarred by loss, shaped by suffering, but unbroken, unbowed, and alive. Across the galaxy, fleets lowered, envoys stepped forward, borders softened, and worlds that had once pointed guns now offered words, space, and peace. The message was clear, simple, and terrifying in its honesty. Humanity had survived everything, and in surviving, it had changed the galaxy without firing a single unnecessary shot. Inside the floating terror, the captain turned to his crew, eyes steady, voice quiet but full of weight. "We will remember this," he said. "We will carry it with us. Not as a burden, but as a reminder of who we are. And we will always choose life." Around him, the humans nodded, feeling the echo of a promise that stretched across space and time. The galaxy, for all its vastness, trembled under that promise. It had met the edge of survival, and it had seen mercy. And now, the universe would never be the same again. Humanity had returned from the darkness, not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as a beacon, a living testament to endurance, courage, and the quiet, unyielding strength of a species that refused to die. The floating terror drifted on, massive and serene, carrying its people toward the stars, toward hope, toward a future that had once seemed impossible, but now shone brighter than any weapon, brighter than any fear, brighter than any shadow the galaxy had ever known. And as it moved, every system that watched, every being that survived, every mind that feared and hoped, knew the truth. Humanity had come, humanity had endured, and humanity had chosen mercy. That choice, the galaxy understood, was the greatest power of all.